I realized I didn't belong at that table long before anyone said it out loud, but the moment the bill landed in front of me, everything became painfully clear in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, letting my eyes adjust to the warm, flattering glow of the restaurant. The lighting was carefully designed to make everything look richer, softer, more important than it probably was. Amber lights reflected off polished wood, and a long table dressed in crisp white linen stretched across the private room like a stage set for something meaningful. Everyone had already settled into their roles. Jackets draped neatly over chairs, glasses half filled with wine, quiet conversations layered over each other like background music. It all felt rehearsed, like a scene I had somehow missed the script for. At the center of it all stood my sister, Emily, her hand resting comfortably on her fiancé Daniel's arm. She was laughing, the kind of effortless laugh that made people turn toward her without realizing it. For a moment, no one noticed me standing there, just outside the flow of everything. That didn't surprise me. It actually felt familiar, like slipping back into a role I had been playing my entire life without ever agreeing to it. I finally stepped forward, moving slowly along the length of the table. My eyes scanned the place settings, each one marked with a small folded card. Thick white paper, elegant black lettering. Our parents' names were there, Daniel's family, cousins, aunts, even distant relatives who barely showed up for anything else. Every seat had been carefully planned, every name deliberately placed. I kept walking, slower now, as a quiet realization began to settle in my chest. There wasn't a card with my name on it. I paused, then checked again, more carefully this time, as if maybe I had missed it. I leaned slightly closer to the table, reading each card one by one. The names didn't change. Mine wasn't there. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was simply absent. That was when Emily noticed me. Her reaction came into parts. First, a small, almost involuntary laugh slipped out, and then she spoke. "Oh, you came." Her tone carried that light, casual quality people use when they want something to sound harmless, already finished before anyone can question it. I gave a small nod, keeping my expression neutral. She stepped closer, her eyes flicking briefly toward the table before returning to me. "I honestly didn't think you'd show up." A few people nearby smiled awkwardly, unsure whether they were supposed to react or pretend they hadn't heard. It was one of those moments that sat right on the edge between a joke and something sharper. I glanced at the table again, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make the absence obvious. No seat, no name, nothing. Emily shrugged slightly, like she was explaining something completely reasonable. "I only planned for the people who are SVPD. Technically, she wasn't wrong. The invitation had come 3 days earlier in a short, almost careless text. It hadn't even felt like an invitation, more like a piece of information. Engagement dinner Thursday, 7 p.m. if you're around. Around, like I was some distant acquaintance who might or might not be in the area. I let out a small breath and nodded again. "It's fine," I said, even though we both knew that wasn't really the point. I turned and walked toward the bar at the far side of the room. My girlfriend, Claire, followed beside me without asking any questions. She didn't need to. She had already seen enough. From the bar, everything looked different. The long table felt farther away, like it belonged to another room entirely. The laughter sounded slightly muted, the conversations less distinct. It was like watching something through glass, close enough to observe but not to be part of. We took 2 stools and ordered drinks. The bartender glanced at us with a polite smile. "Are you with the party?" "Sort of," I replied, and even as I said it, I realized how accurate that answer was. Dinner unfolded in fragments from where we sat. Glasses clinked as someone gave a toast. Laughter rose and fell, occasionally spilling louder than the rest. The waiters moved smoothly between chairs, delivering plates with practiced precision. It was the kind of evening that looked perfect from the outside. Claire leaned slightly toward me, her voice quiet. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." And strangely, I was. There wasn't a sharp moment of pain or a dramatic confrontation. It felt more like something settling into place, a quiet confirmation of something I had always known but never fully acknowledged. I had always been the one who arrived late to everything. Late to stability, late to responsibility, late to becoming the version of adulthood my parents proudly introduced to others. Emily had always been ahead, always the one who fit neatly into expectations. She didn't need to say anything for that dynamic to exist. Family is rarely needed to explain those things out loud. I ordered a small plate from the bar menu. More out of habit than hunger, we ate slowly, taking our time. Every now and then, I glanced back at the table, not really listening, just observing. At one point, Emily looked over and gave me a small smile. It wasn't an invitation. It was more like acknowledgement, as if she was checking a box. Yes, he's here. The dinner stretched on for nearly 2 hours. Eventually, the energy in the room began to shift. Conversations softened, chairs shifted slightly, people leaned back with that satisfied posture that comes at the end of an event. No one had stood up yet, but everyone knew it was over. That was when the waiter approached the bar. He carried a small black folder and stopped directly in front of me. "Excuse me, sir," he said politely. I looked up. Yes. He placed the folder gently on the counter in front of me. The bill for the party? For a moment, I didn't touch it. I could already feel what was inside without opening it. There was a weight to it, not just the number, but the implication behind it. Still, I opened it. At the bottom of the receipt, the total sat clearly, almost calmly. $2,800. I stared at it longer than I expected to. Behind me, the room was still full of quiet conversation. No one was looking in my direction. No one seemed aware of what had just been placed in front of me. What surprised me most was my first reaction. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disbelief. It was calculation. I ran the numbers in my head almost automatically. I could pay it. It would hurt, sure, but it wouldn't destroy me. It would solve the situation quickly. The waiter would thank me, the night would end without tension, and no one would have to deal with the awkwardness. For a brief second, I considered it. Claire leaned closer, her eyes dropping to the receipt. She took it in silently, then looked up at the waiter. Her voice stayed calm, steady. "We're not on the guest list," she said gently. "You might want to check with the bride." The waiter blinked just once, like he needed a second to process that. "Oh, of course." He picked up the folder and turned toward the table. From where we sat, we could see everything unfold. He approached Emily and leaned slightly toward her, speaking quietly. Even without hearing the words, the gesture itself was enough to shift the room. Emily's expression changed almost immediately. Confusion first, then something tighter, more controlled. The waiter opened the folder and showed her the bill. She said something quickly, her voice too low for us to hear. The waiter responded with a polite shake of his head and gestured subtly in our direction. A few heads turned. Daniel leaned closer to her, asking something. Emily responded, her jaw tightening just slightly, her composure still intact but clearly strained beneath the surface. The waiter remained exactly where he was, calm, patient, professional. And just like that, for the first time that evening, I became visible. I didn't wave, I didn't explain, I didn't move at all. I just sat there, letting the moment exist exactly as it was. After a few seconds that felt longer than they should have, Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out his credit card. He handed it to the waiter, who nodded and stepped away. The room slowly returned to its previous rhythm, but something had shifted. It was subtle, almost unspoken, but you could feel it. Like a ripple that had passed through and left everything slightly out of alignment. Emily didn't look toward the bar again. A few minutes later, the waiter returned with the card. The black folder never came back to me. Claire finished the last sip of her drink and set the glass down. "Ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah." We stood up and walked toward the exit, passing the long table on our way out. No one stopped us. No one said anything. Conversations continued as if we were just another part of the background. Outside, the air felt cooler than I expected, sharp against my skin. We walked in silence for a while, the sound of our footsteps filling the space between us. After a few minutes, Claire spoke. "You almost paid it, didn't you?" I nodded. "Why?" I thought about it for a moment, searching for an answer that made sense even to me. "Habit," I finally said. She didn't respond, but she didn't need to. We reached the corner, where the streetlights stretched down the empty road, casting long shadows across the pavement. I slowed slightly, looking ahead without really focusing on anything. For most of my life, I had believed that dignity came from endurance. From staying quiet, from absorbing things without making a scene, from proving over time that I deserved a place at the table. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept doing the right thing, eventually things would shift. But sitting at that bar, watching that bill travel across the room, something inside me had finally clicked into place. You can't earn a place where one was never intended for you. You can't prove belonging to people who have already decided where you stand. And sometimes, the most honest thing you can do, the only thing that actually protects your dignity, isn't to stay and endure. It's to stand up, walk away, and leave the table exactly as they set it.